It was in 1977 when the first Star Wars movie was made. A New Hope was released in theaters and quickly became the highest-grossing movie of all time and a critically acclaimed classic. A New Hope triggered 2 later additions to the original trilogy, some prequels which we'll pretend don't exist, and a brand new trilogy still in the making right now, along with a bunch of other soon-to-be-released Star Wars movies. Star Wars infiltrated every medium, perhaps nowhere nearly as pronounced as in video games. There have been nearly 40 Star Wars games on every platform, from the Wii to DOS, from the Sega CD to the PS4, but I'm just going to narrow down on a single series, the much-beloved shooter title, Battlefront. In 2002, development began for the first Star Wars Battlefront game. The executive producer Greg Burrid said that they wanted to create an online shooter title for the Xbox, PS2, and PC, which would allow for team strategy and would feature battles and worlds from every one of the 6 Star Wars films. The producer stood to his word, and 2 years after development started, Battlefront was released for Windows, Xbox, and the PS2 that featured battles between opposing factions introduced in both the prequel and sequel Star Wars trilogies. Battlefront had a lot of content, and even what some people may consider minigames, such as Galactic Conquest, which allowed players to invade planets in a Risk board game-like way. Battlefront had both a single-player campaign, Galactic Action, offline instant action, which was essentially just team deathmatch with nothing but AI, as well as online matches. Battlefront's gameplay is similar to other conquest-based shooters, especially in online matches and in instant action. Upon release, Star Wars Battlefront received fairly positive reviews, scoring about an 8 out of 10 on every platform. However, there were some outliers. Some of the biggest issues with the game were the dumb AI and the easy difficulty. However, the game was praised for having gorgeous graphics and sound design, as well as keeping true to the Star Wars brand. The developers aimed to fix the few issues with the first Battlefront in the next installment of the series, Star Wars Battlefront 2. The development of Battlefront 2 was a really rocky process. It was intended to be a multiplayer-only title, and the devs only had 1 year to work on finishing the game. When new executives at LucasArts were worried that a multiplayer-only Battlefront 2 wouldn't be that popular, they told the developers to create a single-player campaign. When the developers explained that there were not enough funds or time to be able to work a single-player campaign into the game, the execs told them to just figure it out. With the director nearly breaking down and going mad, it's amazing Battlefront 2 got released at all and didn't go the way of Battlefront 3. Battlefront 2 was released in 2005 for the PS2, Xbox, PC, and PSP. It was essentially the same thing as the first Battlefront, but had Hero Assault and some other modes along with an improved campaign focused on objectives. Of course, the graphics and textures look as if they were about 2 years more advanced. The AI was more intelligent, which meant less glitches too. Overall, the game was better in a lot of ways, but being able to fly in a TIE Fighter or X-Wing was only limited to space battles. Battlefront 2 was also received fairly well. Game outlets gave it anywhere from about a 7 out of 10 to a 9 out of 10. In 2006, LucasArts had made a deal with game developer Free Radical Design. The UK developer was to create the next Battlefront game called Battlefront 3. Development was incredibly rocky, with Free Radical missing many deadlines and LucasArts non-committal to spending money for marketing the game. Development was so slow, the game devs started working on a possible Battlefront 4 before Battlefront 3 was even finished. After Free Radical members weren't paid for 6 months and were unable to communicate with LucasArts, the game was officially cancelled and Free Radical announced that they had lost the rights to developing Battlefront 3. Steve Ellis, the co-founder of Free Radical, claimed the game was 99% complete before it was cancelled, but other past Free Radical employees have also come forward, claiming the game was actually a buggy mess and nowhere near finished. Leaked alpha gameplay shows a fairly complete game, but with several issues such as poor optimization, a ton of bugs, and a lot of glitches. With Free Radical missing several milestones and deadlines, it's understandable that LucasArts cut ties with the developer, but it's a shame we'll never be able to try this game out. After the cancellation of Battlefront 3, LucasArts' focus and vision for the franchise got smaller. The next 3 Battlefront games were made exclusively for the PlayStation Portable, Nintendo DS, and AT&T smartphones, oddly enough. First was Renegade Squadron, released in 2007 for the PSP, which allowed players to create their own custom characters. In 2008, Battlefront Elite Squadron for the PSP and DS was released. Elite Squadron is unique because the transition between space and ground battles was absolutely seamless in instant action mode. Elite Squadron is probably the closest game to Battlefront 3 we'll ever be able to play. Lastly was Battlefront Mobile Squadrons, a game released exclusively back in 2009 for AT&T smartphones. The Star Wars franchise has had a plague of cancelled games besides Battlefront 3. One of these is Battlefront Online. In 2010, LucasArts and Six Slant Games, the developer of 3 SOCOM games and Resident Evil Operation Raccoon City, were working together on a multiplayer exclusive sequel in the franchise. Dubbed Battlefront Online, fans were excited because this game was supposedly the source of all the concept art for a previously canned Battlefront 4. Unfortunately, the game was cancelled as well, as Six Slant couldn't meet LucasArts' deadline. In 2012, LucasArts wanted to make a Star Wars first-person shooter game, which ended up being called Star Wars First Assault. Some speculated that this game would be made solely so that LucasArts could recover from their investments in Battlefront 3 and other canned titles. Based on leaked footage, the gameplay is very similar to Call of Duty. Along with First Assault, LucasArts was working on another game, codenamed Version 2. At the time, the games were both incredibly similar, however, Version 2 was supposed to be a second attempt at Battlefront 3, this time made by LucasArts themselves because they had learned from working with past unreliable game developers. LucasArts at this time was also working on Star Wars 1313, a game similar to Star Wars Bounty Hunter revolving around Boba Fett. All of these games, however, would never see the light of day. Disney bought LucasArts in October 2012, and all 3 of these games, along with some other titles LucasArts were working on, were abruptly cancelled in April 2013. It seems like the world would never see another Star Wars Battlefront game, until... Disney, almost immediately after cancelling all of those games, gave EA exclusive rights to developing Star Wars games, and they knew exactly what fans wanted: a new Battlefront game. Rather than being branded Battlefront 3, EA decided that since this new game would be DICE's interpretation of what Battlefront should be, that they would reboot the entire franchise. After all of LucasArts' projects were cancelled and EA got exclusive rights to Star Wars games, they immediately began development of this new Battlefront game. 2 years and an open beta later, Battlefront was finally released, and it seems like that's when this story got a happy ending. If it weren't for the 2 years of hype that led up to a $60 game with no campaign, little to do content-wise, and tons of paid DLC and Season Pass. Star Wars Battlefront was released in November of 2015 to mixed reviews. Several critics noticed that the game was utterly repetitive and lacked content at launch. However, it did keep true to the Star Wars feel. It's not that the game itself is bad, it's a solid multiplayer shooter, but Battlefront has traditionally always been more than that. Regardless, the game has done pretty well for itself, selling over 12 million units at least. Battlefront even broke records, becoming the fastest selling online PS4 game, beating Destiny. Be that as it may, a lot of people were upset that a game that at launch lacked much content has a $50 season pass and doesn't have a campaign. And that's the full story of Battlefront, explained in as little time as possible. Thanks for making it all the way here if you're still watching. Also, would you mind leaving a like on this video or even subscribing to the Undiscovered Pixel channel? We make tons of video game content here on YouTube, and if you think that sounds cool, click that subscribe button. Leave a comment if you have a suggestion for what we should cover next, or tell us below what you think about Battlefront.